Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the ICAJ's Business Webinar for 2020. My name is Sharon Harvey Wilson, and I will be your chairperson for today. This event is being hosted virtually over 2 days, and no recording is permitted. We'd like to start by especially acknowledging our kind sponsors, Bird Smith & Co. USA, who is our title sponsor, our silver sponsors, A. Peart Advisory Services and PwC Jamaica, and our bronze sponsor, Ernst & Young Jamaica. At this point, I'll invite our president, Mr. Sixto Coy, to give us his opening remarks.
Mrs. Sharon Harvey Wilson, Chair of the Planning Committee, and other committee members, our presenters, sponsors, participants, good afternoon. On behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our 2020 Business Webinar. This two-day event under the theme, Preserving Our Legacy, Charting Our Future Success, comes at a time of heightened awareness for most countries, especially small, import-dependent economies like Jamaica. When you add COVID-19 to the myriad of challenges, it is almost imperative that we harness our collective strengths as a people in order to chart our way forward. As an institute, our mandate is to promote and increase the knowledge, skill, and proficiency of our members, and by extension, the general public. The topics of this webinar have been carefully selected to ensure that we achieve the objective. To address us over the next 2 days is a cadre of dynamic speakers from here and abroad. We appreciate the effort made by our speakers, some of whom had to shift around their schedule in order to participate and share in their knowledge and expertise with us all. Some of them are known to ICAJ, but others, including Ambassador Curtis Ward, our keynote speaker, are joining us for the first time. A special welcome to all of you. Putting together an event such as this, with all the technical requirements, would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors. I take this opportunity to extend thanks to our title sponsor, Bird Smith & Company, out of the United States, silver sponsors, A. Peart Advisory Services and PwC Jamaica, as well as bronze sponsor, Ernst & Young Jamaica. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Before I close, please pause with me for a moment to honor those persons who are affected by this disease.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm excited to chair this webinar as our committee has put together a menu of topics for presentation and discussion, which we believe will enhance your knowledge, brighten your awareness, and leave you CPD compliant. We have also selected a strong panel of brilliant speakers to share insight with us while helping us to preserve our legacy and charting our future success. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our notable keynote speaker, Ambassador Curtis Ward. Ambassador Curtis A. Ward, BA, JD, LLM, is an attorney at law and international consultant with extensive international experience. He has provided advisory services to international and regional organizations, including the United Nations, the Economic Commission for West African States, governments, and international NGOs. He has traveled to over 30 countries professionally for meetings and discussions with government leaders and other high-level government officials and non-governmental organizations. Ambassador Ward served as Ambassador of Jamaica to the United Nations with special responsibility for Security Council affairs between the period 2000 and 2001. He also served as expert advisor and liaison with regional and international organizations to the UN Counter-Terrorism Committee between 2002 and 2005, and has participated in dozens of fora as keynote speaker, panelist, and roundtable discussant. Ambassador Ward has lectured and written on subjects related to global and regional security, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and global and regional geopolitical issues. He is an adjunct professor, Homeland Security Graduate Program, University of the District of Columbia, and a former adjunct professorial lecturer at G.W. Elliott School of International Affairs. He has guest lectured at various institutions in the US, Jamaica, Germany, UK, and Ghana. Please welcome Ambassador Curtis Ward to give us his perspective on what is driving the shift from globalization to populism and the implication. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, Ambassador Curtis Ward.
In this globalized environment, there's hardly any winning position for countries with weak economies like Jamaica. In a globalized and interconnected world, Jamaica's vulnerable economy can be easily shaken by the dynamics in major and between competing capitals. In the past, Jamaican political leaders have managed to walk between the rails of old and new bilateral partners, mindful of competing geopolitical interests, while maintaining the country's reputation for integrity in its bilateral and multilateral relations. Since independence in 1962, Jamaica has gained significant respect and has benefited from its reputation as a country of global integrity and principles. A country which was not afraid to take principled positions regionally and globally, even when Jamaica's positions were not in sync with the superpower to the north or with other traditional European partners. At the same time, small countries like Jamaica cannot afford to make enemies of any country. However, sitting astride the fence, when faced with opportunities to defend principled positions, only because they are difficult or because it might gain the displeasure of a powerful country, has never served Jamaica in the long term. A country's consistency and integrity create confidence for relationships with long-term gains. A coherent and principled foreign policy is not transactional. And in a globalized environment, with the speed of which information flows, the lack of transparency and integrity is easily discernible across the globe by all interested parties. Having said that, the globalization agenda was jolted into a new reality in 2001. The most heinous of terrorist attacks in modern history against the United States on September 11, 2001, sparked an unprecedented security threat on a global scale posed by international terrorism. The international terrorism threat caused significant adjustments to the globalized space and the notion of globalization, affecting all aspects of interdependence and interrelationships. In response, new modalities and counterterrorism norms and capacities were developed and continued to evolve in order to create new security capacities within the globalized space. The safety of civil aviation, the protection of the international supply chain, maintaining the integrity of the international financial system, and guaranteeing the safety and protection of services, such as tourism, have been prioritized. The result has been implementation of travel restrictions, stringent financial regulations, more secure borders, and the growth of nationalism in many countries, including closing the doors to foreign nationals. All of these actions are anathema to the concept of globalization. Populists seize the opportunity to blame the nationals of other countries for their own difficulties. Populist leaders appeal to ethnic, racial, and religious differences. They blamed immigrants and non-nationals for their own failings. And they appealed to the base instincts of segments of the population to gain traction in societies fearful of their safety and well-being and impatient for change. Populist leaders take advantage of the impatience of their populations to turn against non-nationals within their midst as the source of what ails them, as the source of their own marginalization and shortcomings. The growth of populism goes hand in hand with promotion of nationalism. Populists effectively promote racist, anti-immigrant fears, Islamophobia, and xenophobia, and take advantage of these innate fears in sizable segments of the country's population to promote nationalism and populism rooted in racist and xenophobic policies. The malicious use of cyberspace and the nefarious abuse of information technology can create havoc in the public and private sectors. The financial sector is particularly vulnerable to abuse by international criminal networks. The global reach of the internet is the epitome of some of the risks of globalization. The internet does not respect borders and sovereignty. And even with the most sophisticated cybersecurity, criminal enterprises with the most sophisticated cybersecurity, criminal enterprises and malicious actors are constantly seeking and developing new ways to breach cyber security walls to carry out their nefarious activities. The private sector and governments everywhere have no choice but to increase dependence on information technology in order to remain competitive in the case of the private sector, and for governments to efficiently deliver services to their respective populations in highly technologically driven environments. Professional service providers, in particular members of your own accounting profession, have a duty to protect your client's data, a task which becomes more difficult as you adopt technology, which you must, in order to remain competitive and to provide the level of services expected of you to both your domestic and international clients. I know cybersecurity is on your agenda, so I won't say more. Finally, ending on somewhat of a more positive note, relief may be in sight from this chaotic environment. Early indications are that the people of the United States are rejecting populism. In particular, the younger generation are showing the way forward. They are rejecting xenophobia and racism. They are embracing diversity. They are stepping forward in defense of the environment, and they will have an opportunity to decide on November 3rd whether to extend the tenure of its current populist leader or give populism the boot. I wish you a very successful conference webinar. And again, thank you for this opportunity to address you. And I hope I have fulfilled your expectations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Ward. We are indeed grateful for your very insightful presentation. And I know our participants have learned a lot from you today. Certainly, my perspective has been sharpened. In our queue, we have a few questions from our participants for you today. Here we have a question where one of our participants is asking that you mentioned lack of American leadership and you wanted clarity on what does that mean?
Well, as I indicated in giving 3 particular examples, following 9/11, America's leadership created an environment to secure other countries around the world by providing not only technical and expert assistance, but billions and billions of dollars of assistance aid to countries to build their counterterrorism capacities, to protect the financial sectors around the world from infiltration by terrorists. And the US didn't just do this on a bilateral basis. They did it through multilateral and regional organizations, providing hundreds of billions of dollars of financing through the UN, through the OS, through APEC, and so on.
Thank you for that response, Ambassador Ward. Whilst we move to the next session, we have a trivia question for our participants. As we put in a little trivia to sort of soften our tone for this afternoon, there's a lot of strong content happening, and we have to, sort of bring us back to normal a bit. So for our participants, who served as the first president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean? That is, who served as the first president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean? You can pull your answers in the question and answers. In the meantime, we are getting ready for our cybersecurity session. Our first panel discussion will explore cybersecurity and what is being done to safeguard our networks. Our Prime Minister has outlined a strategy to make Jamaica digitally transformed. But what about our cybersecurity? How should companies and individuals protect themselves? Today, we have Dr. Manifa Hewlin, cybercrimes and security consultant, and Mr. Christopher Record, CEO of T-Tech Limited, to discuss the topic. To moderate the discussion, please welcome Mr. Chuck Cameron, founder of the firm Design Privacy. He's an experienced attorney with 21 years at the bar. He has worked extensively in regulatory compliance in the telecom and financial industry, and is skilled in privacy law, commercial law, and copyright law. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him.
Good afternoon, everyone. So when doing the prep work with your presenters today to moderate this event, Chris was reminding me that I should remember that we're speaking to a specific audience and we should contextualize it. My initial reaction was that cybersecurity is relevant to everybody, data protection is relevant to everybody. I don't know what more contextualization is necessary. I did, however, think about it, and I'm thinking that you may all agree that what I'm about to read may be a very good point of departure for everyone in participating. So please afford me about 45 seconds to read something to you. Members have an obligation to respect the confidentiality of information about a client's or employer's affairs acquired in the course of professional services. The duty of confidentiality continues even after the end of the relationship between the member and the client or employer. Confidentiality should always be observed by a member unless specific authority has been given to disclose information or there's a legal or professional duty to disclose. Now, about 20 more seconds to go, but I trust at this stage this should start sounding familiar to most of you, and if it doesn't sound familiar, no comment. Confidentiality is not only a matter of disclosure of information, it also requires that a member acquiring information in the course of performing professional services neither uses nor appears to use that information for personal advantage or for the advantage of a third party. A member has access to much confidential information about a client or employer's affair not otherwise disclosed to the public. Therefore, the member should be relied upon not to make unauthorized disclosure to other persons of such information in order properly to discharge the member's responsibility according to the professional standard. It is in the public interest. It is the interest of the public and the profession that the professional standards relating to confidentiality be defined and guidance given on the nature and extent of the duty of confidentiality and the circumstances in which disclosure of information acquired during the course of providing professional services shall be required. And finally, because I'm not a presenter, I'm just contextualizing, it should be recognized, however, that confidentiality of information is part of, where it's part of statute or common law, and therefore detailed ethical requirements in respect thereof will depend on the applicable laws. So I thought that was a perfect context in which to present the presenters for today, because as of July 2020, there now is statute that treats specifically with confidentiality, and that is the Data Protection Act. The Data Protection Act applies to everyone who processes personal data, and more specifically, there are standards that must govern what you do. That takes us to processing standard number 7, that says that you must have technical and organizational measures in place to safeguard the personal data that you process. So your ethics have told you that you must look at these issues, and today we have presented 2 persons that are going to share with you how on an individual level, company level, and a nationwide level comply in accordance with their ethics and accordance with their law with these technical measures. So today we have Dr. Monifa O'Hewling. She is a cyber crimes and security consultant who worked and studied in the United Kingdom for a number of years before returning to Jamaica in 2014. Dr. Hewlin is credited with building up Jamaica's first cybercrime incident response team, where she led the public education and awareness campaign to heighten the awareness of Jamaicans to cybercrime. And she's going to lead off this session.
So the usual firewalls that protect us are not in place, not necessarily in place, because we are doing the company's business or our own business from a different setting. Now, as a professional, this can be daunting, provided that you're aware. Issue that we're having is that a lot of persons are not aware, especially those who are used to just working have work going on, logging onto your machines and doing what they need to do. Now, having to just take this machine and go, what precautions can you do yourself? Now, one thing we have noted is that basic hygiene or cyber hygiene and the fundamentals remain the most important aspect of cybersecurity. You may have heard, if you are one who have followed cybersecurity or just had a conversation with someone in cybersecurity, you may have heard that the human factor remains the most vulnerable. And such are usually deemed easy targets. So you get an email, they send you an email that seems urgent, and you will click on it. You will do as it says you are to do. You will download what you need to download. And now that you are basically on the radar and out of the protection of an organization, or basically setting up for yourself, you'll realize that you will be targeted. You'll get some of these emails. I was told that one this morning where she was told that came from a bank, and actually this is a computer, she's one of your members. But she was saying to me that she got an email supposedly from her bank saying that they were resetting some system and told her what her password was and that she was changing it. A lot of persons live for their photos, and that's for another presentation. But if you want to preserve them and keep them intact, it's a good idea to back it up. Whatever data you have, your financial data, you need to ensure that the backing up is just having a copy or two of it elsewhere other than on the machine that it resides. So now, as I close, I want you to remember these 6 things.
So I will just, if that is okay, so I will just introduce Christopher Rickard-Noll, our second panelist, who is the Chief Executive Officer of TTEC Limited, Jamaica's only pure IT outsourcing and managed service provider. Chris has over 33 years of experience in the delivery and implementation of information technology solutions, and is a regular speaker on technology in the IT industry. I actually understand he's supposed to be speaking in a Haiti Tech Summit coming up shortly. For fun, Chris writes a wine column in the Jamaica Observer and hosts wine-related events in Jamaica and the USA. So Chris is the first person I know who writes about wine for fun instead of drinking it. So Chris, over to you. I gave up on trying to remember these passwords, and I now officially just write them down, and I'm not going to say where because I don't want anybody to come and thief it.
If you do write them, please don't write what they're for.
Right.
I've gone to give a presentation already, believe it or not. And the lady said, but miss, I have to write them down. I can't remember it. And before I could say anything else, she popped out one of those things that fold out. And I could see on it, Facebook and the password beside it. Twitter and the password beside it. Her bank and the password beside it. I said, even if you're going to write it, you cannot do that.
Thank you very much. Sir Chris, how would you treat with that from a corporate level?
So there's organizations out there that create software specifically for this. So FastPass is one that a number of folks in our industry use. And so for example, for my work and what we do have a number of passwords and accesses for hundreds of our customers' equipment. And so we have to make sure that those are, Fort Knox is not even tight enough the way that we have to lock away, and two-factor, and well, not two-factor, multi-factor authentication to ensure that those things are protected. And so it's massively important for us. My high-level recommendation to folks is have 3 categories of passwords. Have your generic basic social media is nothing that you're going to, if you lose it, is not connected to any credit card or any financial, but social media sadly nowadays has been used to, it's been used to figure out your location and do things, and even cyberbullying and all of that. But a level of password for that, because that is just more entertainment. Next level is, of course, going your secure access to your own equipment and your maybe your office Wi-Fi and things like that. And then now the highest secure one is your banking and your financial. Those must be a minimum of 12 characters. Of course, the banks are already putting in requirements, so they are telling that. And like Monifia, most of my passwords I do remember in my head. I'll confess, I'm in the IT industry, I'm in the IT cybersecurity industry. I do have a little secret piece of paper as my backup, but they don't say what is for what. And I mix up what I write where, but in my mind, there's some method to the madness. What I've also done is, and it's, years ago, people said, but I can't, but I'm having to remember so many things. I said, look, we live in Jamaica. Apart from the Queen's English that we're supposed to speak, we also have another language, which is our dialect. And I said, come up with some interesting past phrases in the Jamaican dialect and just remember them. It is harder for the auto password generators to create something in another language, and not just another language, but a broken language that's a mix of many words. So I just jokingly tell people, you know your colorful language. Just do creative things, but make sure that you have characters, the special characters also in the midst of there. So my passwords are minimum of 12 characters long, and they're passphrases with numbers and uppercase and lowercase and characters in there. And yes, there are sometimes when I try to put them in and I get say wrong, put them in 2 times wrong, start to sweat, and I have to race. I won't tell you where the piece of paper is, and then I have to make sure that I fix it. So that's a high-level recommendation on passwords.
Mute, I say.
Yes, sir.
Right. So we quickly wrapping up. I just have one general question for both of you. If there is one, what's the most important thing? If there were to only be one step or one action that an individual or company would take to at least start their journey, but know that, yes, I've taken a fundamental step that puts me in a better position than I am today, tomorrow, what one important step would that be in relation to protecting ourselves and our assets? Who wants to take that one first?
It's on the screen.
I have put up my answer on the screen.
Okay.
It is cybersecurity awareness training. We have to stop the breaches at the weakest link. It is us, the human beings, that are clicking on the link that allows the mayhem to be unleashed on our organizations. It is people. I've had family members that call to say, look, man, I get this email and it sounds really legitimate. That's a real email. I said, stop. I said, delete it. No. I said, delete it now. That is not coming from a bank. The bank does not email something like that to you. There's no mistake. Nobody mistake and put $1 million in their account. No, it didn't happen. Right? Delete the account. Delete it now. No prince from Nigeria is trying to get your help to move his money out because he's being victimized. Delete it now. Seriously, people actually believe that stuff, right? So, cybersecurity awareness training. This is cybersecurity Awareness Month. So if you just search Cybersecurity Awareness Month, the amount of free training that's out there right now that you can use in your organizations, even at home, that's it. Manifia, is you want to add, because Manifia was the one who set up all of this in Jamaica, by the way. We supported a lot of what she did. Manifia has decided to move on to bigger and better things, but she has all of this stuff in her head. Manifia?
Well,
Yes.
if you see Sharon looking sideways, that's her looking at me, giving me the
I
time
figure.
signal. So if you
Yes.
Fully
could,
understood.
I'm moderating, so just quickly, please squeeze it in for me, Monique.
Yes, as I said when I was going to respond, it's already on the screen. Awareness is the key because we are the weakest link, and we need to just stop taking it for granted that we're smarter than a social engineer.
Thank you very much, both of you, for speaking on having a discussion around cybersecurity from a corporate individual and a little from the national perspective in terms of the legislation. Thank you very much, and I hope we were able to impart at least one piece of new knowledge today. Over back to you, please, Madam Moderator of the event.
Thank you, Chuck. I just have one more question to ask you and your panelists, and I hope you can provide a quick response. We have spent a lot of time giving us tips as to how to safeguard ourselves and our corporations. But I listened to Ambassador Curtis Ward's presentation, and he spoke about cyber threats. I mean, specifically with Russia interfering with American politics. And in my opening comments, I spoke about our country moving into a digital age. From a national perspective, how do us as citizens safeguard ourselves? What you shared with us today, is that sufficient? How would you advise if you're advising our government? That's my question.
You wanted me to chime in on that as well?
Yes, you can, sure.
So it does all start with the individual acknowledging that they are responsibility for their own personal data. And similarly so, if you were to extend that and take that into your workplace, the same way that you would want to you expect your personal data to be treated is the same way you have to treat the other personal data that you process. It is as simple as that. It can be treated, you can view it in the same context of the pandemic. We must take personal responsibilities for ourselves and our neighbors. Chris, Monisha, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on that.
I think you handled it quite nicely on our behalf, sir. I need to jump and go run to Haiti right now.
Thank you very much. Monisha?
Ditto, I think that covers it quite well.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Just to give us a quick answer to our trivia questions, our first trivia question, which was who served as the first president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean? Our answer is Alice Madden. I know we have had several other answers, but those are incorrect. It's actually Alice Madden. Special acknowledgement to our kind sponsors, title sponsor, Burt Smith & Co., USA, silver sponsors, A-Period Advisory Services and PwC Jamaica. Our bronze sponsor, Ernst & Young, Jamaica. So, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your break. And now we're moving into our Second half, we will have 2 more sessions to cover. And before I move in, I'll just pose another trivia question for our participants so that you can think about it while the presentations are being done. This past president's name has a letter K in their first name and L in their surname. This past president's name has a letter K in their first name and L in their surname. So now we're moving to our next topic. How agile is your company? How quickly can you upskill or reskill your human capital? When I saw this topic, one thing came to mind was Jamaican terminology. Wheel and come again. How agile is your company? Today we have with us Dr. Patrick Sterling. He's a human resource and industrial relations practitioner. He has work experience in education, insurance, retail, telecommunications, manufacturing and distribution, holding senior HR leadership roles in several entities including Lime Jamaica, Pepsi Cola Jamaica, and Carreras Limited. He's currently head of human resources and industrial relations at Separate Limited. I welcome you, Dr. Patrick Sterling, and I hand over to you for your presentation.
I'm going to share some thoughts with you based on learnings I've had in the industry, in research I've done, engagements I've had around the topic, agility of the organization, upskilling human capital. In fact, the title is loaded, so I've tried to link in some thoughts to make sure that we have some very valuable takeaways. So let me join in the welcome and let's proceed. So thank you very much again. So getting from here to there. Question is, in fact, the topic is loaded, as I said before. How agile is your company? How quickly can you upskill or reskill your human capital? In fact, I dare say, how agile is your organization? Because I suspect that there are persons here from the public sector. Is there one here from nonprofit or other sectors? I suspect that you want to make it broad-based in my deliberation. So how agile is your company? How quickly can you upskill and reskill or reskill your human capital? Secondly, coming out of our topic, can your business culture adapt to rapid changes in your operations? And how quickly can your team dynamic leverage opportunities to respond to challenge? Quite a bit coming out of this one topic. We're seeing the issue of upskilling, we're seeing the issue of adaptability, we're seeing the issue of culture. I'm going to touch on all of those just to make sure we pin everything together for a workable understanding of what we're about. But let me make it personal to all of us. Even as we look at our topic, are you personally able to quickly upskill or reskill your capabilities? Because when we talk about upskilling and reskilling and all of these kind of change dimensions, we reflect back on the human resources we have. The people who are listening to me now, who are the change agents and who have been tasked with changing the organization, I'm asking you the question. I'm asking you also, are you able to quickly upskill or reskill the capabilities of your team? So yourself first as a lead, and of course, your team, because it's the people that will make the difference in an upskilling endeavor. And then broadly, is the management team committed towards upskilling of people's capabilities? Because then we can say all of these wonderful things in seminars and presentations and meetings, but then you go back and there's no commitment from the wider management team. Does the organization have the resources to facilitate the upskilling and the reskilling of capabilities? Because it's going to take resources and effort and commitment to make it happen. Is the organization, even if there's no resource available, prepared to make resources available? So that's going to be the game changer. So we will have a wonderful desire to make things happen. But if the resources are not there, then it's just left as a pie in the sky reality. But then it depends on our culture. I will not spend spend the entire evening talking about culture, but just to give us a kind of working understanding of what we're talking about. You all know from your previous study, many of you, that when we talk about culture, we look at the basic assumptions that govern a group. Those assumptions that have been invented and discovered and rediscovered, developed, redeveloped, and become part of learning and become part of how we cope with problems internally, and also that enable us to adapt externally and also to integrate ourselves internally. They have worked well and they have been considered valid over many years. They are so valued, I should say, that we are directed to teach this way of doing and thinking to the members who join us. And so when we're talking about upskilling and reskilling and adaptability, we have to go back to what it is about our culture that will enable all of that. So that's important as well. Another definition of culture is about the basic assumption and values, orientations to life, beliefs, policies, procedures, and behavioral conventions that are shared by a group of people. And I want to stress on the phrase, the behavioral conventions, because these become the game changers in terms of anything we want to achieve within the organization. So we can talk about adaptability, we can talk about upskilling and reskilling, but if there's no cultural mindset to make it happen, then we're going to be in problems. So I'm asking us to look at that as well as one of the determinants, and of course, one of the areas that we need to be focusing on. I asked a question, what's your culture like? I don't know. Is the culture within the formal arrangement that promotes rewards of persons for outputs, tolerates diversity, promotes drives for efficiency, facilitates innovation, facilitates talent development, or is there an informal set of other policies that govern how this place is run? Sometimes I find in my own experience that the informal culture sometimes trumps the formal, and you wonder what exactly is the culture. What exactly should be the yardstick in terms of behavioral element around here. So I would ask us to look at that cultural fabric within our space that is going to help to determine what we do and determine the future of our organization. Culture is not easily changed, as you know from your experience. We do not, as Boss Vian Charan says, we do not think ourselves into a way of acting. We act ourselves into a way of doing things. We have thinking, and if we are going to create any kind of change, we have to demystify culture. We have to look at the beliefs specific to certain behaviors, and we need to look at changing people's behaviors. So I'm actually setting the issue of upskilling and adaptability and agility within the context of culture, because it's real and we cannot skip past it in how we talk about change, any kind of change within the organization. So imagine for a while where we would like to be. Imagine for a while where we would like to be. And as we imagine where we would like to be, consider again, because you have some experience in this, the common changes that we experience in the business environment. Now, I don't know about you, but the type of work I do, the type of work I have done, or I give advice on, or research I've done, show that there are some common changes that we experience within our environment that, again, our culture and our ability to adapt and deal with will determine our future as an organization. One, pressure on prices. I don't know if your type of business has to deal with prices of commodities, inputs and outputs, and that's a challenge for you in your planning. Industry consolidation among competitors and customers. I don't know. That's a reality for many businesses. The customer and the competitor are two great external impacts on our business. Increasing customer focus and value. No longer are people sitting back and waiting and accepting substandard products. They're looking to find worth and value in what they spend. Integration of supply chains. I don't know the type of business you operate in, that there's a whole network of supply chains that feed into what you do. And so much as you are trying to negotiate better prices with them, so much are they trying to integrate their arrangements such that they can negotiate in a more tangible way with you. Greater focus on innovation, newness and change and dynamism and doing things differently, creativity and enhancing the human spirit in a different and dynamic way. Need I mention rapid change in technology? Yeah, big one. Do I also need to mention the change in workforce, more mobile workforce, the new workplace issues and new employee expectations, globalization, increasing regulatory pressure, greater need for partnerships and alliances to ensure that our survival is assured, yes? And to compound all of this, we're having to contend with disasters and health crises impacting the economy, business, and the workplace. So here we could look at COVID-19, but I have not put the phrase COVID-19 in my presentation because this presentation has to last beyond COVID-19. COVID-19 has to fit into the context of what we call the impact of health crises on the economy. So we are dealing with all of those issues already, and then this, and others to come. And so it is within all of this context that we speak about adaptability of organization, agility of organization, enabling the human element to enable us to be so adaptable and agile in the organization. But then it depends again, what type of organizations are we? Imagine the adaptive organization. Imagine the adaptive organization from one focus on bureaucratic foundation, multi-level approaches to how we manage people, expectation that senior managers will manage, and a raft of policies and procedures that are complicated and create internal dependencies, depending on a few performance information systems and other issues going down, slow to make decisions, political issues, risk averse to anything new. To an organization where it's non-bureaucratic, with fewer rules, fewer levels, where management will lead and allow other staff to participate and upskill themselves to manage, where there are many performance systems, where there's access to data, where there's the mindset towards identifying sources of information that will create empowerment, where there's openness and candid reasoning around what is to come, where we seek out what is at a risk to us and determine how we are going to treat with the risk. That's part of what we look at when we talk about the adaptive organization. But then reimagine then, my friends, their organization. Reimagine. And reimagine towards reimaging. What does that sound? Reimagine towards reimaging the organization towards cultural adaptability. Because anything about upskilling and reskilling and getting people ready is all about reimaging. And to reimage, we have to reimagine from whence we've come to where we are going. Look at this figure. I don't know, what are your thoughts? Ms. Wilson, I don't know what you think about this figure here. Gentlemen, but let me read.
Very handsome face, a very handsome face.
Very handsome. The face, Ms. Wilson, you're saying the face is handsome. But let me say, I have been bodybuilding for almost 20 years now. This is how I look. I am 100% vegetarian, never ate non-veg, and never took drugs or amino acids. It's been very hard work, but an absolute joy to look into the mirror. My aim is to become the first vegetarian Mr. Universe in bodybuilding. My name is Gajhot Gahar. I am actually in the background. This is not me on the front. I am in the background. This is my aspiration. I am imagining.
You had me wondering.
Yes, Miss Wilson. So I am in the background, Miss Wilson. This is not me. I'm not there yet. So it's an aspiration. It's an imagination to get there. So yeah, but I don't want to remain in the background. I want to come forward to make my aspirations a reality. It could be bodybuilding goal. It could be other aspirations to make us better. So we reimagine the future for our organization and rethink our culture and strategies. So to reimage in this context presents a new look, a fresher, reinvigorated, forward-looking framework, a new approach, and then to get us there, reimagining the talent that will help us make it possible. So I would like us to, within the context of upskilling and reskilling people, let's look at it from the standpoint of talent. All of you listening to me now are the talents that someone or some entity has invested in to ensure that we are able to achieve the changes that we require within the space in which you work and within which you have influence. You are the talents that will make the difference. So how will we go about attracting the kind of talent that we need to enhance our organization? And even as we reimagine and reimage, it's loaded already with many possibilities for change and discovery, seeing what other people, seeing what everybody has been seeing and thinking what no one else has thought possible. Generating new plans, responding to current economic challenges, renewing our focus and our efforts to harness innovation and all the things that will creatively help us to get to where we want to. So we rethink our imagery. Not the imagery of what we have done and we're unsuccessful at, but what we'll be doing next. The imagery we choose to use to describe what we'll do and who we do it for and how we get there. The imagery of the new technology we will employ, the imagery of the talent we require. This is my context, and I cannot help but focus reskilling and upskilling and adaptability within this context of a total picture. In fact, that's how I've personally learned to ensure that all the threads across the organization, both within the task environment of the organization and the external environment, are welded together to ensure the kind of success that we need. So it has to be a focused arrangement, a focused look in terms of what we want to achieve. But let's move on. Reimagining. It assumes the application of different sets of lenses to view the challenge that we face in a different way, of being absolutely clear about what we want and what we'll do about it. So to the question about is your organization able to upskill and reskill and all of these other dynamic stuff and adapt, has to be set in the context of what we re-image or reimagine, imagine to achieve. So consider this imagery. I gave you one before, I'll give you another one now. Consider this imagery and the statements coming out of it. It says, we took legendary and made it liberating. We took safe and made it daring. We took intelligent and made it utterly irresistible. We took the most advanced E-class ever and made it the most exciting E-class ever. The best or nothing. Now, this was copied from a commercial, from the Mercedes-Benz TV commercial. And what were they talking about? What were they imagining? What was the imagery they're presenting to us? A car. This is it. And so we could adopt and adapt that to our reality. So here's where talent is going to work. So talent has made a difference in what they were able to achieve. Technology made a difference, and the combination of both gave them certainty for success, okay? But let's consider this image for your organization, this imagery for your organization. And I just chose some words because, and I hope they are broad-based and universal enough to fit within your context. We overturned uncertainty and created resilience. Is that true about your place, or can it be true about your place? We took it unattractive and made it super ordinate. Just some choice of words to reflect some realities. We applied incubation to research and data and made it invigorating and purposeful. Yeah? We pursued diversification and created tons of possibilities. We combined new technology with creativity and made it forward thinking. We took the most skilled talent ever and made it the most innovative and creative talent ever. Did I reflect anything about your organization, your outlook in terms of upskilling talent? Because this is kind of what we want to achieve. It's the best or nothing. And it's my little saying, you know, so I put my little trademark on it. I pulled together to suit a varied set of circumstances. So what's the destination? If we speak about all of this and all of what we spoke about before, what then is the destination? Destination, a more agile organization. Yeah? Because you talk about upskilling, reskilling, yeah? Adapting your organization despite its cultural realities, or we could even say its cultural nuances or cultural difficulties. Destination, notwithstanding all of that, is a more agile organization. A network of teams based on McKinsey and Company 2018 within a people-centered culture that operates in a rapid learning and fast decision cycles which are enabled by technology and that is guided by a powerful common purpose to co-create value for all stakeholders. Destination agile or destination agility. Yeah. So when we talk about an agile organization where all of this is possible, it's an organization outfitted to respond to disruptive trends, a quickly evolving environment, we spoke about that earlier, a constant introduction of disruptive technology, yeah, fast-paced, the new war for talent, rapid decision and learning cycles, dynamic people model that ignites passion, next generation enabling technology. And the technology, as you know, is moving fast in terms of the creativity. There is a creative will among our people to make things happen. And we could add to this list, but let's keep it here because we need to manage time. So again, McKinsey and Company describes what we call the agile organization, looking at the nexus between organizations seen as machines to organizations seen as organisms. Where, for those of you who studied scientific management, the Taylorites, Frederick Taylor and his colleagues on the left looked at the organization as machines, hierarchy, bureaucracy, detailed instruction, working in silos, doing one thing very well, to organizations as organisms, where we respond quickly to changes, we're flexible, we focus more on teams and building accountability and enabling people. So I could not launch into this discussion just to talk about the upskilling and the reskilling. We need to look at it in the context of where we are and where we need to go. Because where we need to go will determine any level of upskilling, decision to upskill, resources to make it happen. Because we are saying we want to move from a bureaucratic arrangement, we want to re-image ourselves, we want to reimagine what we can be and what we have the possibility of becoming, and then we prepare our people to take us there, because it's the people now that will make that difference. So we can't upskill and reskill and right skill and anything in a vacuum. Again, talent will make the difference. Technology will help make the difference, and both combined with innovation will create a high level of certainty. We focus on 5 areas of what we call this agile organization. It looks what it looks like. Looks at 5 areas: strategy, structure, people, process, technology. We look at each of them in turn. We talk about agility in the organization. On strategy, it's a shared purpose and vision. It's sensing and seizing opportunities. It's being flexible in resource allocation. On structure, clear flat structure. Flattening of structures. It's clear accountability of roles. It's open physical and virtual environments. It's hands-on governance. On process, rapid experimentation, standardized ways of working, performance orientation, information transparency, continuous learning, action-oriented decision-making. And on the people side, a culture, we spoke about culture earlier, that puts people at the center. A talent management toolbox that builds required capacity. Dynamic people model that ignites passion. Deliberate people engagement. Now, I could do another presentation with this slide only. Yes, because this slide already is loaded with possibilities. We talk about upskilling people. For what purpose and how do we expect they will take us to the next level? And to the extent that we determine that is the extent to which we are going to enable them to, we are going to prepare them so to do. On technology, we spoke about this earlier, next generation enabling technology, evolving technology architecture, systems, and tools. That's what McKinsey and Company defines as the agile organization that is able to respond in the most volatile environment. And the justification is that human capital risk is the most serious challenge facing many global operations within the last decade. In fact, in the businesses in which I've worked, yes, we face resource challenges for raw materials. And then we have the bigger challenge of selling the product, pricing it well. But let me tell you, the biggest of them is the human resources, finding the talent to enable your business. It's a challenge. And so talent management cannot be left by the wayside until such time. It has to occupy front and center in terms of creating an infrastructure to support business growth. So here are the questions facing many organizations. How are we going to get the people we need to grow this business? How will we seek to improve capabilities of our people? Yeah, do we have the resources? Do we have the will? Do we have the commitment from everyone to make it happen? What are the types of talents that are presently required to enable our business? What are the types of talents in greatest demand? What are the types of talent most difficult to source locally? Let me tell you something, friends. There are talents that I need in my industry right now in Jamaica of 2020, which they are not in Jamaica. Somehow we have a boss that is so universally, so commercially minded, so forward thinking, that we are now having to look 5 years down the line for where we're going and the talents we need to get us there. And the talents we need now to get us to where we want to be, where we think we can be. Not only the talents we want to hire, but where we need to upskill our people. The talents we want are in India, are in Mexico, are in the UK, are in China to some extent, yes. Are not necessarily within the Caribbean. And it's not to say that you want a better accountant, not necessarily. Not a better accountant because you have qualified accountants here. No, not at all. We're trying to find people, not just to be called accountants, but people who are innovative, who are forward thinking, who have the mindset towards change, who can enable our general context of innovation. So even if you're not called an accountant and you're called something else, and the end game is still accounting, what kind of innovative capacity is there that we can harness for our business? So we're about to be looking fast and forward for the type of talent. What type of talent are we experiencing the greatest turnover within our confine, within Jamaica, within the Caribbean? And if it is that our people are going to be leaving us, do we have people who can backfill? And if we don't have those people, how can we upskill those individuals to help make a difference? Is our current approach to talent acquisition and development most suitable to our business? What are the capabilities, professional or otherwise, that we require for the next 10 years? Will our company be able to dominate the market and attract the best talent? Can I just insert here that when we talk about upskilling and reskilling and shifting people, it's not only about sending people to a training course or a webinar or conference or otherwise. No, not at all. Not at all. If we're going to infuse change in our culture, it means that our present managers will need to identify the opportunities for learning within our current confine. Yes, where coaching will make a difference, where education and training within this whole confine and not necessarily to send to a school will make a difference in upskilling and reskilling our people so they can make a difference. Yeah, it's going to be a redefinition of the way in which we choose how we will use education and learning to make a difference. So it doesn't have to be the diploma or the certificate or other thing. It might likely be a 3-hour or a 3-day upskilling in a competency that is not now available anywhere else. But guess what? We have 2 or 3 people here with that competency, and they are willing, or we're able to motivate them to build that willingness to share that information. Yeah, so we can build talent. So if we can't hire the talent, then certainly we can grow it from within, definitely. And that is possible. That is possible. I mean, in the last few weeks, I've heard so many colleagues speaking about taking the time to do something we're doing, a webinar, to learn something, but online training and 30-minute exposure to a new skill, maybe communication, maybe soft skill development, something, but taking hold of those possibilities to upskill so that when COVID is over, when this season would have passed, then we would have come through it with a new skill, a new capability. So what's here locally? What's in other places? What's the talents with the highest turnover rate? And so the challenge then is to adopt a consolidated view of what we call talent management and talent development initiatives with the support of executives and top managers right in the mix. The willingness of our leaders, as I said before, to question whether our processes will produce the workforce and leadership capabilities needed to be competitive in the future. Go back to the whole focus on reimagining what we can be, and then set that in context. The recruiting process, how we go about recruiting. I could take us into one bigger discussion about the questions we ask in interviews now. Can we be innovative in those questions such that, for example, anybody who comes for a job now, yes, we have seen your functional capabilities, we have seen your diploma, we have seen all the things on your resume. Your resumes look so well, yes, but then we want to ask you some questions which are not on your resume. We want to ask you, when was the last time you did any kind of training or development? Not when the last time you graduated from a school or college or what. When was the last time you did anything in training? When was the last time you were exposed to any kind of training? But not only that, when was the last time were you exposed to anything in innovation? Something new you brought to your last job or otherwise, or somebody exposed you to something new, or you exposed someone in that regard, and then you learn something out of it. So even in how we recruit and how the discussions we have at the table is going to be beyond the usual things about how you identify talent and how through that interview process, we can identify persons for upskilling and talent and learning. Because some people come in and they say, I'm qualified, set me to work. And we say, okay, we can set you to work only after we would have shaped you a little bit. Some people are not open to be shaped because they say they come as a superstar. But that's another part of the assessment. If you are willing to be shaped, to be upskilled, and to the right skilled, it's going to make a difference. So we have to adopt a broad-based initiatives, notwithstanding all the problems we face. It can't be a shortcut measure. It has to be effective. And we have to make sure we do the right thing for the business. How do we do that? A robust people process that will provide a framework for determining the organization's talent needs over time and for planning actions that will meet those needs, of course. It has to be planned. So it can't be a knee-jerk reaction within this period of crisis, but this period of crisis should be a context, a springboard to move forward and to prepare for any other eventuality, even as it impacts talent. Now, let's imagine this for 2021. We took profitable and made it sustainable. We took diversification and made it legendary. We took imagination and created transformation. Yeah? We took the best innovations ever and achieved the greatest innovations ever. The best for the future or nothing. How does it sound as a mission statement? Could be a mission statement in terms of our forward thinkingness, my word. It could very well be a mission statement, right, Ms. Wilson? It looks good for a mission statement. And you can see people coming to your place and just drooling over this. And the people who come for interviews drooling over this because this is where we have positioned ourselves in terms of the skills we need and the talents we require. Right? And then now, having looked at all of that, my focus is always on this because the goal is to ensure we are profitable and the profitability is sustainable. It's not a pie in the sky thing because we upskill and we adapt and we are agile for a reason, right, guys? It is not true. Right? We're running a business. It's not a free-for-all thing. We're spending money. In fact, where I work, the money we spend is not ours, outside of the credits we have from other institutions, and I can't call names now, but we're spending shareholders' money, and you have to make a return. Yes, and that's how the accountants help us to keep all of that in check. But I have my eyes on the money. When I see you come on an interview, I wonder if you can help us make more money, definitely. So let's set a framework. Reimagining the sector, whatever sector you're in, is led from a strategic perspective. Let's begin a new conversation for the rest of 2020 about various possibilities to upskill our workforce and to make our business culture more adaptable to change. Yeah, can we start that conversation last quarter, October, November, December? Yeah. In 2021, let's continue with a liberating conversation about the path towards achieving a greater focus on agility. Yeah, can we put that in as part of the slide presentation in the strategic plan for next year? I don't know. In 2021, let's evaluate the processes of transformation achieved this year, having gone through what you've gone through. And then let's build on that and apply yet new thinking and innovation for 2022. And let's call it our little 2 or 3 year focus for talent, right? So just imagine the difference that can be achieved when talent and innovation are combined to create a more agile organization. That's the end game. And if we have the end game squarely set in our focus, then our upskilling arrangements, our reskilling arrangements, our adaptability arrangements will be more meaningful. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments, contributions from anybody? Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Sterling, for such invigorating presentation. You certainly have met my expectation in terms of the topic and the issue of agility within your company. It has been very insightful for me. One question for you though, in terms of the agility of companies and the talent that people bring to organization, where do you think the change should start. I'm sitting here thinking that our education system needs to look at this topic as well, from a national level, to prepare our workforce coming up to be thinking this way and to provide them with the necessary skill set to be agile.
Well, definitely the education system should focus on nationally where we need to go as a nation, and baseline skills that our employees, our students need to survive in a business environment. What are the baseline skills they need? Not only the technical skills, but also the soft skills, because that's important in infusing a culture with the right kind of behaviors that are necessary. And once we have that raw material, we'll have something to work with. But if it is that we fail as an education system where we are graduating people who have not matriculated to even the two critical subjects, math and English, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem. And let me tell you, Ms. Wilson, good question. You said the catching up thing, it's hard. When people miss that 5-year mark and to catch up, it's difficult if they miss that mark. So the school has a major role to play, then the home has a major role to play as well. But then as a nation, we need to decide where we're going and what we're going to be in the future, because these are the young people we are going to seek to employ to make a difference in our organization. And if you have the baseline, it's going to be a challenge. So yes, you're correct.
We have a question here from one of our participants. What is your recommendation for a dual operating system to balance operations and transformation?
A dual operating system?
Yes.
To balance?
To balance operations and transformation.
Well, I mean, depends on your culture. If you're changing from one system to the next, I don't see it happening overnight. You can't just walk in and say you're changing culture and you're going to tear down everything one night and tomorrow or next week you'll have everything. So we have to think that it will be necessary that systems work concurrently until you're able to transition to the model that is desirable, right? So for example, if we have persons who are less skilled, been there for many years working with old systems, and you're seeking to change to a new system, we would want to see how best we could train those persons to operate the new systems while we engage new people to operate those and do a slow transition based on your needs and based on how fast you can move. The quicker your people are able to respond to you, the better you're able to move into new systems. So the two operating models is as good as the people who operate them and how quickly they are able to enable you to make that change. It's all about the people. I hope I've answered the question.
I think you have. Thanks again, Dr. Sterling, for your very, very wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing from you again.
Thank you.
Certainly,
thank you, Ms. Wilson.
You have really done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson.
Okay, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. All the best for the rest of your conference.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will now provide the answer for the trivia question that was asked the last time. It was, this past president's name has a letter K in their first name and L in their surname. The name is Ken La Cruz. Don't know how much of those among us remember Mr. La Cruz. He was my former boss early back in the day. Okay. Now we're moving on to our final topic for the afternoon, which is how will accountants deliver assurance to our stakeholders, COVID-19 complexity, optimism versus realism. This session will be moderated by our president, Mr. Sixto Coy, and he'll be joined by our panelists, Mrs. Caroline Bell Wisdom of PwC Jamaica and Mr. Wilbert Spence of KPMG, as well as Mr. Frank James, Chief Executive Officer of Grace Kennedy Foods. Over to you, Mr. Coy.
Thank you, Sharon. All right. So the topic, Sharon says, is how will the accountant deliver assurance to our stakeholders? How do we build on ICAJ's foundation of probity and assurance, reflections on the role of the accountant given increased levels of complexity associated with the impact of COVID-19, handling the challenges of optimism versus realism. And we have selected 3 very competent people to give their perspective on this. We have Frank James, CEO, GK Foods Domestic. We have Carlin from PwC. She's a risk partner. And we have Wilbert Spence. He's a partner at KPMG in the assurance section, very experienced auditor. So the way I'm looking at it, or we're looking at it, is that allow Frank to give us his perspective as a CEO looking at the optimistic projections and the reality that he's facing right now. I'll ask Carlin to come in as the risk advisor and how she has been advising her clients to mitigate these risks. And then Wilbert will come in and give us the perspective as how he would suggest we audit these optimism versus the reality. So let me just give you a brief bio on the presenters. Mr. Frank James joined Grace Kennedy in August 2005 as Vice President of Strategic Planning and Corporate Development, and then Information Service Division. He has held a number of positions within GK Group, and he was appointed CEO of GK Foods Domestic in April 2019. Mrs. Carlin Bell Wisdom is a partner in risk assurance services at PwC Jamaica. She has been with the Jamaican firm since 1997. She advises a wide range of firms, indigenous and multinational clients across virtually all industry sectors, including energy, telecommunications, government, manufacturing, distribution, retail, tourism, hospitality, agribusiness, banking and insurance. And then Mr. Wilbert Spence is a partner and the head of corporate citizenship at KPMG in Jamaica. He has managed statutory audits for numerous companies within the financial services, manufacturing and distribution sectors. Wilbert has professional experience exceeding 30 years. He currently serves as the Honorary Treasurer of Jamaica Chamber of Commerce and is a member of the Accounting Standards Committee of the ICAJ. So I'll ask Mr. Frank James to do his presentation first, and then Carolyn, and then Wilbert.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator, and thanks to the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica for inviting me. I think because I am not an accountant and certainly not a chartered accountant, and I note that I am surrounded by some very esteemed chartered accountants. So either the ICAJ made a mistake or you have decided that you wanted a non-accountant's perspective.
Yes, what is your perspective, Frank?
All right.
As a CEO.
I was going to say, I'm hoping, I will assume it since I'm here already, and give you the non-accountant's perspective. So I know my accountant friends will forgive me if I don't know all the IFRSs by heart, and if I use common terms like P&L and balance sheet rather than statement of financial position and these fancy terms. So let me share from the CEO perspective what I am expecting from my internal accountant function, from the CFO and the accounting team in this current environment. But let me first start by setting a little context about what I mean when I say this current environment. Some years ago, about 5 years ago in 2015, I participated in a panel discussion much like this, and the topic was about the future, and my central theme was the concept of VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. No, little did I know back then that we hadn't seen nothing yet. But that we are in the midst of COVID, now we understand what this VUCA concept really is about. When you think about it, volatility, I mean, back in May the expectation for GDP contraction was a 4 to 6% for the fiscal year. In the second quarter, we had an 18% contraction. And by September, the expectation is now an 8 to 10% contraction in GDP for the fiscal year. We're talking about volatility. Uncertainty. Up to the end of July, we had less than 1,000 cases, confirmed cases of COVID in Jamaica. Within less than 2 months, that was over 6,000. And today it's over 7,000. So you're talking about real uncertainty. Complexity, the number of factors that you have to put together when making decisions. Balancing lives versus livelihood. Do I need to say anything more? That is the most complex set of decisions that we have had to face, and not just at a national level, but at company levels and even at individual levels, this issue of how we balance lives versus livelihood. Complexity. And then ambiguity. And this comes to the heart of optimism versus realism. We're facing one of the most challenging economic scenarios in decades, but at the same time, we have entities who have been able to take on projects like digitalization and e-commerce in record time. Challenges that we have been grappling with for many years have been implemented in record time, notwithstanding that we're in the most challenging economic scenarios that we've seen in many years. So there's a lot of ambiguity in the environment. So there's no doubt that we're operating in a VUCA world. So what does that mean for the role of the accountant? What do I as CEO expect from the CFO and the accounting team? Well, let me say right away, timely and accurate financial reporting is a given. So that's clear, that's a must. We don't have to spend any time on that. But I believe that the CFO and the accounting function are uniquely positioned to bring a lot more to the table than just that, especially in this current environment. And so what is it that I would be looking for in a business? And it's PEAKS, and another acronym. But this time I made up the acronym, so I'm particularly proud of this one since I created it. And it actually starts with E, but EEKS didn't sound so good at the beginning. So it's PEAKS with P at the end. But I'm going to start with the E. The first thing is ensure survival. The CFO, the accounting function, guardians of the financial health of the business, ensure survival. A, avoid surprises. Secondly, avoid surprises. Thirdly, keep us honest. Probity, spoke about probity, Mr. Moderator, keep us honest. S, support agile decision making, and the previous presenter spoke a lot about agility. And then P, plan for opportunities, prepare for challenges. And that again comes to the heart of optimism versus realism. So I want to just give a few examples of each of these briefly before I close. So ensure survival. You know, as accountants, the question of going concern will clearly arise in a context like this, but it does no help to me to come and tell me at the end of the financial period that the business is no longer assessed as a going concern. What I want you to do is help me make sure that we remain a going concern. So the question is how? How do you do that? Well, one, liquidity management. Liquidity management is key in an environment like this, and the finance and accounting function have a key role to play in that. Do we have the appropriate funding in place? Are we managing our leverage appropriately? Do we need to liquidate assets to maintain liquidity? Do we have to sell and lease back property? What are the innovative ways in which we can continue to ensure that our balance sheet is strong and we manage the leverage in the business? Expense management is another one. We need to start spending, and it's a two-edged sword because there are going to be areas of the business that we didn't plan to spend in that we're going to have to spend in. In the case of Grace Kennedy, our first and top priority when COVID came was the safety of our people. And so right away, there were things that we had to spend on to secure people and our customers that were not planned for. So you have to open up the budget for that. But at the same time, our accounting team started combing through to say, where can we find savings to fund that and to pay for that? So expense management, capital expenditure management. There may be capital expenditures that were planned and approved, but now we have to start stress testing those and really asking the question, whether or not this is a priority at this time and deciding what is a priority, where are the opportunities that we should actually allocate our capital. So 1 is ensure survival. 2, avoid surprises. Now, reporting historical information, as I said before, is a given, but I want the accounting team to see beyond the historical information, to look into the numbers and see around the corner. Help me to see around the corner. What are the numbers today telling us about the pitfalls that we could be facing tomorrow? The team should be constantly evaluating the health of the business. What are those early warning signs, the key indicators that we need to be looking at to help us see around the corner? The income statement might be looking very good, but is there something in the balance sheet that I should be aware of and that I should be concerned about? Are there intangible assets that are at risk of impairment that need to be brought to the table quickly so we can understand the implications on how we treat with them? Accounts receivable management, again, telling me at the end of the financial reporting period that, oh, we have to make this huge provision that's necessary and required, but I want you to help me make sure that we collect the receivables. So how could you do that? Proactively looking at our exposure, saying which are the industries that have been impacted by COVID and what are the key receivables and exposures that we have on our balance sheet in those industries that we must attack first. A lot of business decisions are going to have to be being made in quick time. What are the accounting implications of those business decisions? We might be looking to renegotiate lease terms, renegotiate employment contracts. We might be looking at our currency exposures. As we make those decisions, the accounting team, the CFO needs to be right by the side to say, here, especially for a publicly traded company, these are the accounting implications for these decisions. Is there a wiser way for us to do it? And a very important one is scenario planning. We need to constantly be reviewing what is our outlook for the business based on the changing environment. And again, the CFO and the accounting team have a key role to play in that. So 2, avoid surprises. Keep us honest. Probity cannot be compromised. And at the end of the day, it's the tough role of the accounting team to share the hard, cold facts. And we must ensure that our financial statements reflect any of the major implications of COVID-19 and the effects of COVID-19. Judgments and estimates have always been a key role of the accountant, and they become even more important and, of course, even more complex in an environment like this. A prime example, IFRS 9 with the estimation of expected credit losses. I think it's the central bank that came out and said you can't just assume that your usual expected credit loss model can just be applied. We now need to start looking at the unprecedented level of uncertainty in the economy, how industries are changing, what's the impact of the relief measures by the government. The minister spoke last night about extending some of those. Do we need to resegment the way we look at our portfolios as industry dynamics change? So again, being very proactive in saying, how do we adjust and adapt to this new environment in the way that we make decisions or accounting decisions. Information and communication is critical in a crisis, and leaving a vacuum is dangerous. And it's not just through the financial statements that the CFO needs to get involved, but it is also in interacting with the shareholders at AGMs, investor briefings, and so on. You know, I was CFO many years ago, not that many, but it feels like many years ago. And at AGMs, the shareholders after the presentation would go to the CEO and say, what an exciting presentation, really great, love the plans for the future, etc. And they would come to me as CFO and say, great presentation, we feel that the business is in good hands and secure. And so it showed the critical role that the CFO plays in giving assurance to the shareholders and other stakeholders that the business is sound, and doing so by being very credible and transparent, because if you're not transparent, it is going to leave room for people to make all kinds of assumptions. Being very credible and transparent about what is happening, the impact it's having on the business, and what we are doing about it to protect the business. So keeping us honest is one of the tough roles and the important roles of the accounting team. Support agile decision making. Due diligence is not less important in a VUCA world, it is actually more important, but it has to be quick, it has to be flexible, it has to be nimble. How can the accounting function support this? Building flexible financial models that can be quickly and easily updated as information changes, as we get more knowledge about the changing environment. Keeping informed of that changing environment. What is changing? The legislation, the industries that are changing. The world is interconnected, so we can't only track what's happening in Jamaica, we have to be tracking what's happening outside of Jamaica. And how does that affect our financial position? How does that affect the plans that the business has? And prioritizing the areas of focus. Too many factors are changing for us to adjust all of them, but which are the ones that are going to have the biggest impact? And then finally, the P that comes to the end, plan for opportunities, prepare for challenges. And this comes to the heart of that optimism versus realism. And we have been speaking about optimism versus realism as if they work against each other, but in my opinion, they complement each other. The optimist in you says that we're going to succeed, we're going to survive and thrive, and then the realist adds on, but it won't be easy, and we don't have all the answers. So we need to do X and we need to do Y. So optimism and realism should really complement and support each other. In Grace Kennedy, we have a very clear philosophy that in any crisis and in any challenge, there are opportunities, and therefore we have to be searching for those. And then saying, we know those aren't going to be easy, but we will put in the resources to make it happen where we see those opportunities. Another good example is the budgeting process. And again, this is a process that the accounting team is integrally involved in. Now, this is probably the most difficult budget that any team is going to have to be putting together given the environment that we're operating in. What are some of the key things that the CFO and the accounting team need to bring to the table? One, a common understanding of the future assumptions that we're going to be working with about the future. And they're not going to be perfect. That's where the uncertainty comes in. But we all as an organization need to have that common understanding, or the budgets when they're put together won't make sense, and we won't be able to explain the variances which will occur when they occur. So getting that common understanding around what are our expectations for recovery time and what are our macroeconomic assumptions, etc. Zero-based budgeting, that's no longer just a buzzword. I mean, we have to comb through every line item in the income statement, every expense line item, and really question it. You know, is this really still relevant? What does work from home mean for these expense line items? What do curfews mean? What does digital acceleration mean for our expense base as a company? Building flexibility and the ability to respond. Normally we want to keep budgets very tight, but in this type of uncertain environment, you know, we normally don't like things like contingency and so on, but you're going to need some kind of contingency, not at the individual business unit level, but at the corporate level, so that the corporation can make decisions as new information arises as to how to release those contingencies. And it could be because new opportunities open up. It could be because there are challenges that come along. So we need triggers that are going to determine when we release those contingencies. It might be something in your supply chain. It might be when revenue hits a certain level. It might be certain changes in the industry. What will be those triggers that will determine how we use those contingencies and our ability to respond to opportunities as they arise? So, Mr. Moderator, I want to just summarize by saying we are living in a VUCA world, no more than anybody could imagine, that requires a special and unique role from the CFO and the accounting function in ensuring that we as a company reach the peaks rather than heading towards the valleys. The CFO has a unique role to play, and we think that with that, it can mean the success of our businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Very insightful presentation indeed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator.
Hi, Curly.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I am hearing you.
Great.
I'm not seeing you though.
Okay, I started my video. You're seeing me now?
I'm seeing you now.
Great, wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone who is on the webinar. Thanks again, ICAJ, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. It's a very important topic, very important discussion. Just two quick thoughts relating to the topic and the flow of the discussions. I think Frank somehow did respond to most of the risks that he did put forward, but I will spend just a few minutes to highlight one or two additional areas, or speak a little bit more about one or two additional areas. And pardon me, Mr. Moderator and the participants, there is a particular area or topic that I'm particularly passionate about. Doesn't necessarily deal with our current situation, but more of a longer term view, which I will also take the opportunity to raise because it's relevant to risk and relevant to a number of the items that Frank would have mentioned. Frank, love the model. Peaks. Love the model. I think it works. And just to highlight, I think, as I said, you did in fact share some of the strategies where you highlighted what you would expect from a CFO or your accounting team. And just to share here, based on what the moderator has so kindly asked me to touch on, some of the items that would have come out from some surveys, global surveys, and regional surveys that we would have done as a firm recently. So sum total, there are 6 key areas of focus for organizations now while we're in the pandemic. And naturally, to Frank's point, the accountant has a key role. All of us have a key role, whether you're operating as the accountant in your organization or you're playing another role, to be at the forefront. We have already been at the forefront. We will continue to be at the forefront. And these are some of the key areas of focus that came out from those surveys. So I'll only touch on some of them because Frank's presentation was quite comprehensive in terms of what you would expect to address in your role, right? So one of the things I don't think I heard was ensuring that you have a crisis management team. One of the good things relating to our management of COVID, and I think most organizations have recognized that, you know, we're in this new situation and it's not a matter of hoping it will go away. So most organizations would have gotten straight into, we need to do something. And one of the good things that I believe happened is that persons quickly recognized that they need to put together a crisis management team to mobilize and coordinate effort across the organizations. For example, we would have done that here at the firm. We would have encouraged most of our clients to do that. And I believe that was one of the areas that we did well. And yes, the accountant would have been a key part of that. One of the things that COVID has brought more sharply into focus is our people. I think for a number of years, we took people for granted. We took the importance of people in the organization for granted. And COVID was a reminder to all of us how critical the workforce is, how critical it is for us to manage people. One of the challenges I know a number of organizations are facing now is managing productivity while people are working from home. There are different tools. And this is just for joke, guys. This one is just for joke. I heard about a provider who was actually selling cubicles, cubicles that an organization could help to set up at the staff's home. Yeah, so you'd have a good workspace because that's one of the things that would help with productivity. That had a camera. I don't think we should go that far, but certainly supporting the workforce in this transition to work from home is one of the things that we need to take take on. We had to make the technological transformation, and we moved fairly quickly with that. Now we need to help the people to maximize the technology and be productive in their current spaces. That's one area that I know we need to give some focus to now. I don't recall if Frank had mentioned the whole management of supply chain, which was something that I think we've crossed the hurdle for the most part where that is concerned, but the COVID scenario reminded us about resiliency in our supply chain. So that is one of the areas. If you haven't looked at that because your supply chain seems fine, I would suggest that you take a look back at it. Finance and liquidity, some of the key takeaways there. When you are doing your scenario analysis, try as best as possible to use worst case scenarios, right? In the past, when we would do modeling, we used to, we probably have best or average that we primarily contemplate. As we all know, the worst has happened in a number of cases, and maybe we were not prepared for it because we never modeled on that basis. There are also implications relating to tax, trade, and regulatory, which all of our persons in accounting, for example, would be at the forefront of dealing with this. And at the end of the day, don't forget your strategy and your brand. We've had to undertake the digital transformation, which is very critical. We've had to, be agile and all of that. In all of what you're doing, think about how you are building your brand, right? And for the other element of what I wanted to touch on, you're still seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Great. So one of the things that I would like us to do is to not only think about the scenario that we have now in relation to COVID. There will come a time when we will speak of COVID in the past tense. Hopefully, we emerge stronger. We have learned from the experience. There are lots of things that have happened during this window of time. So we know about COVID. We can also readily think about the Black Lives Matter and the protests that were basically all over the globe relating to that. What COVID has shown us is that those global megatrends that we've heard about and known of over a number of years, they're here and they're now, and they're affecting how we operate. So we need to tackle them here and now because they will continue to impact us. PwC had developed a framework that we refer to as ADAPT, relating to how do you manage in this scenario of the mega trends, where there's this increasing wealth disparity, there's disruption. We've spoken a bit about the technological disruption, but there's another element to it that I want to highlight. The demographic pressures across societies and even entire countries. Polarization, we see that it's showing itself in protests and a lot of discontent and declining confidence in institutions, right? So the framework actually goes into, for each of these elements, as a nation, what do you need to think about? As an organization, what do you need to think about? And as people, what do you need to think about? I'm not going to go into all of the details, but what I wanted to highlight is that as accountants, we are in many roles. We are in roles to help at a national level, at an organizational level, and also at a people level. And we need to understand and accelerate what needs to happen in relation to this. The area that I mentioned that I'm passionate about, that I wanted to highlight, is the matter of climate change. So one of the things that COVID reminded us about is, I know that there are different theories relating to it, but a part of what is considered to have brought the virus about is quote unquote mishandling of our environment. That is something that is happening on a wide scale. And we have seen how in the short few months of impact of COVID, the tourism sector being crippled and how that had a ripple effect through the economy. The statistics relating to climate change, they are absolutely frightening. Some of these projections estimate 100% of beach loss in 100 years. Within the Caribbean region, we are particularly vulnerable. We need to address these. We see what COVID has done in the space of a few months. Can you imagine if our tourism sector, all of the infrastructure along or that are close to the seaside and so on are decimated, what that will mean? So how do I see accountants having a role where this is concerned? We are in positions of influence at all levels. We need to continue to agitate, continue to put on the agenda in whatever roles we play, the matter of responsibility, accountability as it relates to the environment. In particular, I believe we need to get to a stage where we are measuring the impact and taking account of that in how we report in our financial statements. So that is my contribution today, Mr. Moderator, and I know questions will come later on.
Indeed, they will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for those additional insights and recommendations. Wilbert?
Before I get into my presentation, I probably want to join with all who have wished the ICAJ, extend best wishes to the ICAJ and to our Chartered Accountant as we celebrate the Chartered Accountants Week. I think in terms of the topic, we probably would have made mention of the ICAJ as well and the role it has played, because I believe that as accountants, we are really linked to the ICAJ. And one cannot help but to probably thank the founding fathers as well for the concept of developing the ICAJ, and we have seen how it will have progressed over the years. Now that COVID is here, I probably also want to point out that it's not the first time that, well, it's the first time we're experiencing a pandemic, at least this generation, but it's not the first time that the accounting profession is experiencing what I would call a crisis, because you would have recalled a few years ago, in 2018 to be exact, when I had a financial crisis that was worldwide. The ICAJ again played an integral role back then, and various advisories were issued, especially when it comes to valuing investments that didn't have an active market. So that was really a technicality that the ICAJ would have addressed. But not long after that, you had the Jamaica Debt Exchange, JDX, you had the NDX, and you also had the France. And in all of those cases, again, the ICAJ would have stepped in and issued advisory as to how those are to be addressed. I think one must compliment the ICAJ as well in terms of, and in particular the Accounting Standard Committee, in terms of its involvement by assisting various accountants and auditors, even regulators and the public at large, because we do reviews of public companies listed on the stock exchange and provide feedback and so on. So I think just want to highlight the role of the ICAJ over the years. Let me probably come specific to auditing in a COVID environment. I think the first thing I want to emphasize is that as auditors, we're required to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. With or without COVID, that does not change. So despite all the challenges with COVID, the auditors still have the responsibility to achieve that. So it's not like those standard setters got up and said, well, we recognize the challenges with COVID, so I'm going to ask you to lower your standard and do less work and seek less audit evidence. That has not changed. In fact, I can tell you that it has increased because we're required to do more. And you know, now that we have a lot of business people and they call and they say that it will be reflected in the audit fees. Just bear that in mind as well, because of the additional work we're called upon to do. But I think when I to start with in terms of COVID-19, one has to consider how management has responded to it. So if I am to audit a company, that's one of the first questions I would like to ask. What has management done in response to COVID-19? Because really, it's not the auditor's problem actually. It's really the companies who are to respond to these changes. And I like the idea about risk management, what would have done. And Frank, I particularly like your presentation, the things that you have outlined and so on. So when I come in, these are the things that I really want to see to start with in terms of auditing. What is it you have done? How have you responded? How have you restructured and so on? So these are some of the general matters. And when it comes to specific items now, that in the normal course of doing the audit, nothing has changed where that is concerned. But I think I'm just going to mention some of the areas that will probably present most challenges. And well, it has to do first of all with uncertainties and estimate. And when it comes to estimate, you take, for example, loans and financial institutions. That is a headache to the financial institutions. It's a headache to the auditors. It's almost a headache to everyone. So you have loans, you have receivables, you have inventories, PP&E, intangible, goodwill, investment properties, and so on. The list goes on. So all of these areas are subject to some amount of estimate and provides a challenge for the auditors. What we must also realize is that to assist the auditors would have engaged, or management would have engaged professionals who would help in these areas. So it's not entirely up to the auditor to carry out that work. If, for example, I'm going to look at investment properties. When it comes to investment properties, we're expecting there to be valuation of the properties. So you're going to engage some valuators. And the auditors will in turn assess the appropriateness of those valuations. And it was recently, for example, I had discussions with valuators, and they informed me that what you really need is that when you're doing a valuation, the valuator must be told what is the purpose of the valuation, because the value that comes out is dependent on the purpose for which you are doing the valuation. So, for example, if you are doing the valuation to sell a property, you will, and it's the same, let's say you have two valuators looking at the same property. You'll get different values, and the values can vary by a wide margin. If one is doing the valuation for sale, whereas another is doing it for rental income. So we have to bear that in mind. We have to specify the purpose of the valuation in order to get the value that we really want to report on. So again, these specialists, we have to engage them and then have specialists to review the work of the specialists. I hope I haven't complicated that, but that's how it is. So for example, at KPMG, we do employ specialists to review the work of specialists, including, for example, actuaries. We have to review the work of the actuaries. So we have to engage or employ actuaries for that purpose. So in terms of, for example, loans, we have this expression that they call it ECL. That is very complicated. Again, that is a highly specialized area, and we do use specialists to review the ECL, and the results goes into financial statements. So I mean, you do have non-financial assets as well that are subject to impairment. And that word impairment is really a challenging word, because nowadays almost everything get caught under impairments, whether it is tangible assets, receivables, inventories, loans, investments, everything, and you get goodwill as well, get caught under impairment. So the question is, how do you audit impairment? And impairment, as I said, is really an estimate. And since we have been mentioned of the tourism industry, there's one experience I'm going to share. We're wrapping up the audit of one of our hotels. And we have to do a consultation on it because of the whole going concern and so on. And they really challenged us regarding the going concern in Jamaica. And I mean, they took it worldwide because they started looking at the airline industry, the apprehensiveness of travelers, really, are they comfortable with traveling? And there are a number of things. And in the end, they said, look, the hotel industry is dependent on them successfully finding a vaccine that people can be comfortable with. So until now, I think the hotel industry will limp along, but then it came to the point as to what do you do with the hotel itself? So there's this massive structure that is put up there with probably 1,000 rooms. How do you assess that building? What purpose, what value it has, and so on? That was really the question. And I said to them, look, guy, seriously, you're not going to expect that these buildings are going to write down the value or anything like that. I mean, they're carrying them at cost, so we don't really need to get into the valuation of the building. And in the end, we really agree. But the point is that there's a challenge regarding non-financial assets in terms of the impairment. And the auditor has to do that assessment to determine whether there's an impairment. As I said, there's always the intangibles, there's the inventory, and also the receivables. And one has to be careful about the receivables. Because if, for example, I'm operating a trading company, and most of my sales are really to companies in the hotel industry. And all of these hotels, I mean, are now doing little or no business. How do I assess that receivable? I mean, it is really a challenge for the auditor now to say, look, the hotel really, they really don't have any money. So you're going to have a problem, you have to impair these receivables. So, I mean, you really don't look at the company in isolation. You probably look at the bigger picture. As I said, if most of the goods are sold to the hotel industry, then that is a side effect it's going to have on this particular company. So we have to bear that in mind. I made mention of the specialists that we have to include specialists in it. I think other areas that we have to consider in terms of auditing is, for example, loan covenant. A lot of companies are facing cash flows. So we have to look at the impact it is having on their cash flows, and therefore whether or not they'll be in breach of loan covenant, which will take me to my final and probably major area of concern, and that is going concern. The pandemic has really affected a number of companies. And as auditors, despite all the work that you have done and so on, if you get the going concern wrong, believe me, you're really in trouble. Because you have to look at that entity and make that determination as to whether it is a going concern. As I said, I would have been in a situation where I would have had to argue strongly that the company is a going concern. But at the end of the day, you must have the evidence and paper so that someone who is not involved with the audit, someone who is independent of the audit, can review all that evidence and conclude, as you have, that the company is a going concern. So you have to look at things like cash flows, and you have to challenge those cash flows, because it's one thing for management to do a budget, and they'll always come up with these fancy modelings and fancy budgeting and all of those things. And I mean, Frank, I probably like what you talk about your financial modeling and so on, but it is where it can really stand up to the test of time, how realistic it is and so on. So we really have to challenge it, you know, and all. I mean, I know you're very optimistic and all of those things you put in place, but the point is that how realistic they really are, that is the question we have to ask ourselves. What source of funding have you secured to continue? I know they have always said that cash is king, and this is one time where we can really endorse that, because despite all the fixed assets you may have, despite all that might exist, the good name, the goodwill that you have in the market and so on, if you really don't have cash, then you're really in problems. So you have to have that goodwill where you can secure cash, where the company can continue, you can pay your bills and so on. I mean, if you think of, for example, the amount of adjustments you would have had to make regarding employees, people working from home and so on. I mean, again, I'm giving an example as to where I am involved. And I mean, all of a sudden, all of this cost started hitting us where You have to buy a computer for your staff because if they used to have desktop at home, I mean in the office, but you have to buy a laptop for them to take home. And to expand that, they're saying, look, you know, my internet at home is not so good. Can you get us dongler? Can you put in internet for us? Then I hear that it's just one desk I have at home and my child is homeschooling. I need a desk. And it's as if you have to buy a whole office for them at home. So if you have several employees, you have to outfit their homes to accommodate working from home. So it is really a challenge, and all these things as auditors, we have to assess. Is the company a going concern? Have we obtained appropriate audit evidence? Remember, as I said, with the pandemic, with COVID-19, it hasn't changed the fact that you must obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So by whatever means, just recently, again, we have some inventory counts to do. Normally, you send a team, maybe have 10 or thereabout to these counts. With the restrictions you have now in terms of the number of persons who can be, you know, within a certain proximity, you have to look and rearrange the whole inventory counts to see how you can get people there without breaching the protocol that the government has put in place. So it is really a challenge for the auditors. So there's much that you have to consider in terms of obtaining that evidence. It's not business as usual. The internet and whatever software you can put in place to carry out your audit now, it will really help. I think that is the way to go. The question is whether or not things will ever return to normal, or this is a new norm, as they say, in terms of how we carry out our audits. But it is really a challenging time, but in the end, the auditor must still obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence on which to base their audit report. So again, I say in a nutshell, these are really challenging times. It is really going to increase the time that auditors are required to audit a set of financial statements. The cost will increase, time, it will take longer to carry out those audits. You have to involve more specialists in it because of the different areas and highly specialized areas that are involved. But the responsibility still lies on the auditor when he signs off the audit report that he obtains sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Mr. Chairman, I hope I would have, in a nutshell, provided enough, and I'll certainly welcome any questions thereafter.
I enjoyed this presentation, the various presentations, although they're from a different, they're each have their own different perspective, but in the long run, I found that it became complementary. I mean, the points brought out were similar in terms of the risks and how we mitigate those. So the floor is open for any questions online. You can type in your questions. Yeah, somebody was asking if they'll get the presentations. Sure, you'll get those. Any questions for the presenters? Well, as I said, it was a very good presentation from all the presenters, and as I said, it seemed to have just gelled very, very well.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. If I may chime in, very good presentation from you all. Thank you very much. It sufficiently covers the topic that the planning committee envisioned for the webinar, sorry. And certainly, I guess an investor looking on will be assured that the auditors will be carrying out sufficient task in ensuring that the financial health of the company is properly represented. So that's where we are now. It's a very dangerous time, a very chaotic time for business owners, and certainly really need to set the guidelines straight so that when they come across with the judgments and the estimates, then it's well aligned with what is required of them, and to certainly keep them honest. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of day one. Hope everybody can, and more people will be able to join Tomorrow.
Oh, looking like we're having two more questions here.
Questions, okay. All
right. Just to add, how easy is it to measure productivity in the work from home scenario?
Frank, you want to take
Frank? That? Yeah, I think it would be more.
Sure. That is certainly one of the things that we have been grappling with, measuring the issue of productivity. For some of our businesses, it's easier than others based on the nature of that business and the nature of the function. But it is not one that I would say we have cracked as yet across the group in terms of how we measure productivity. So I think with the work from home becoming the standard, and I think, Sharon, you may have said that it will eventually be something we speak about in the past. Yes, COVID will be, but work from home is here to stay.
Certainly.
And that's one of the opportunities we see in the challenges. That is, as I said, Grace Kenny, we have been talking about work from home and telecommuting for a long time and grappling with those, but today it's implemented and it's here to stay. So measuring productivity is going to be key. Some of the metrics you use today may not change for some businesses, but for some it will certainly have to be rethought. And that's something we're going to have to spend some time on now, because that's not one that we have the answer for yet. But it is going to be key in making sure. And to get that productivity, how do you keep people engaged? So there are lots of things around making sure the metric comes out the way you ultimately want it to. What do you have to do to keep people engaged, to keep people motivated? So those are the questions we're going to be grappling with going forward. So it's a very good and relevant and timely question.
Yes, we have one final question. I don't know if it's someone boss is on the panel, but the person is asking, do employees still receive incentives in this time?
Mr. Moderator, again, it's going to depend. Remember, again, on the industry and the companies and how they have been affected.
Yeah,
many companies have had to make some very tough decisions. You're talking about incentives. Some companies have actually had to cut salaries, much less to be paying incentives. On the other hand, some companies have been able to do fairly well in the environment and certainly would therefore continue to pay, we would think, incentives. I think one of the things that persons have to keep in mind is there's both what's happening today, but there's also how will this environment impact the future of the business. So speak about things like incentives, you saw where the central bank took decisions about dividends, even though they may be profits. So there are lots of difficult decisions that are going to have to be made, but I would say directly to that question is going to be company specific and depending on the impact on that company, whether they are able to do that or not.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, panelists. We really enjoyed the presentation, as I've said before, and we look forward to inviting you again to any next forum of similar agenda so that you can share your insight. It has been really good for us. Thank you again. Okay, thank you too to our participants. We have come to the end of the first day. You know, I had one more trivia question before the day is over, and I'm gonna ask it despite the timing, because I think everybody on this webinar should have the answer. And the question is, what is the DJ name used by Leighton McKnight? Anyone know the answer for that? The DJ name used by Leighton McKnight. Don't see any answers coming up. Yes, I see fire, but the fire don't spell right. Everybody firing, but General Fire. Oh, one person got the spelling right. Yes, you're correct. It's fire. F-I-Y-A-H. F-Y-A-H. That's it. That's a spelling. Fire. Again, thank you all for your participation. Once again, we'd like to acknowledge our kind sponsors, our title sponsor, Mr. Bert Smith & Co. Our silver sponsors, A-Period Advisory Services and PwC Jamaica, and our bronze sponsor, Ernst & Young Jamaica. We really are very grateful for this sponsorship and look forward to any future sponsorship. Tomorrow, we have a great lineup of topics for you, and we look forward for your continued participation. Thank you very much. Remain safe. God bless.